I think there's a good risk that if they're really hurting, that before it gets to the point where they would feel the need to find a way to stop it, meaning they would be prepared to negotiate an end on terms that might not be the terms that they want. I think before we get to that point, they will escalate militarily.
Iran has dismissed US President Donald Trump's newly announced sanctions campaign as they might as a diversion from domestic American issues, warning that so-called economic D-Day would only bring further defeat to Washington. It comes after Donald Trump announced the launch of an unprecedented, crushing economic operation against Iran after the two countries failed to reach a deal. They warned that any country offering Tehran a lifeline will face severe financial retaliation. Let's speak to Ambassador Denis Ross, who is a former US Middle East peace envoy under Bush and Clinton's administrations. Ambassador, thank you for being with us. Can you just give us a detail here, for those who haven't followed quite as closely as presumably you have today, what economic D-Day that Donald Trump describes this as means in real terms?
Well, first I have to start by saying it's fairly typical for President Trump to overclaim what it is that he's doing. We have had sanctions on Iran for a long time. We have had secondary sanctions on Iran for a long time, meaning someone who does business with Iran runs the risk of being sanctioned by us. What he's describing is we're going to go much farther than we've ever gone before on that. Now, that would be interesting. He's going to have a summit with President Xi of China. Who buys 90% of Iran's oil? China. So are we going to see the president crack down hard on Chinese banks or what they call their teapot oil companies for doing business with the Iranians, even if they try to shield it? I think that's an open question. I'm not so sure that's going to be the case. I do think, however, that the fact that we have a blockade on Iran, and that makes it very difficult for them to import or export. It means it's very difficult for them to get their oil out. That, I think, is what is squeezing the Iranians more than anything else. And if the UAE, the Emirates, yesterday they announced that they were going to cut off all trade on financial transactions with Iran, and that may be, to be fair, that may be in response to what the president or the secretary of the Treasury are asking. Then you're talking about a very significant squeeze economically of the Iranians at a time when their economy is already in free fall, where their currency has no value, where they have difficulty providing water and electricity. I mean, they are being squeezed economically, but this is, after all, a regime that does not put the well-being of its people first. It's prepared to impose on them. They certainly don't want to give in to the president. My guess is that the more this economic squeeze, if it does involve the UAE, and I should just add, they get more of a third of their imports from the Emirates. A lot of banks and businesses, Iranian banks and businesses, have operated from the UAE. So it's a source of revenue and it's a source of evading sanctions. So if the UAE is really going to go along with what the president is asking and what they themselves have now declared, this is going to have an impact on the Iranians for sure. Now, my own guess is when they get pressure applied to them, they will think about counter pressure. I think they read President Trump right now as not wanting to escalate militarily, and that's why he's focused more on economic pressure. I think there's a good risk that if they're really hurting, that before it gets to the point where they would feel the need to find a way to stop it, meaning they would be prepared to negotiate an end on terms that might not be the terms that they want. I think before we get to that point, they will escalate militarily.
And okay, we'll come back to that point in a moment, Ambassador. Can I also ask you about other means that Iran have for either getting money in and out of the country, and in particular in relation, I guess, to being able to sort of fund and support proxies like the Houthis and Hezbollah? In the aftermath of America's attack on Iran back in February, the sort of initial attack on Iran in February, we saw this strange moment where the internet sort of flickered off, as it often does in Iran, in some of the sort of more populated areas of Iran, and then flickered back on for a time, and we saw a massive transfer of cryptocurrency out of the country before it kind of flickered back off again, right? So that suggests that Iran are using cryptocurrencies and sort of off-grid currencies as a way of evading sanctions and continuing to function and continue to operate. How relevant is that? Is that still happening? Is that sustainable for Iran in a way that sort of makes these sanctions much less meaningful?
I'm sure it's going on because every tool and trick that they've learned to evade sanctions, you can assume they're going to employ now. Cryptocurrency is clearly one. But as you referred to, look, they shut down their internet. Basically, they shut off their whole internet economy. So they always will put the survival of the regime politically first. They'll make the public pay the price. That, of course, is kind of mortgaging their future in a lot of ways. So they will do everything they can to try to minimize the impact of this. But cryptocurrencies can't make up for the fact that they can't sell their oil.
Right.
So that's just a fundamental problem they face right now. But that is less what Trump declared. That's more the blockade.
Yeah.
Look, think about it. He sent a signal early on that they understood quite well. For the first month of the war, you referred to February 28th, for the first month, they didn't allow anybody else to ship out their oil. They blocked everybody else. But we allowed them to ship out their oil because we didn't want the price of oil to go up so high. They understood that very well. It meant the president was highly sensitive to the price of oil. So they still know he's highly sensitive to that. So they will make threats about what they will do. If they can't, in the end, export their oil, they'll make it clear they're not prepared to allow anybody else to export their oil. So this is still a contest here of who can endure longer the kind of price that's being imposed. They believe that they have more of a pain threshold, more of a pain tolerance than President Trump does. To be fair to him right now, what we're doing economically, especially, as I said, I want to reemphasize, it's a combination of the blockade and if you have the UAE being a full partner in this, then this is going to hurt the Iranians much more than anything we've seen up until now.
Okay. Just finally, Ambassador, Donald Trump has also repeated claims that Iran's navy and air force are destroyed and its currency worthless. We've been back and forth on this, haven't we? About the sort of truth of the status of Iran's military and its capability. What is your sort of read on that from your position?
All right, so I think if we talk about the Air Force wasn't a threat to begin with. I mean, it's basically dependent upon generations old aircraft. If we talk about the currency, he's right. It has very little value. The standard exchange rate used to be something like 42,500 rial to the dollar a couple of years ago. Now it's close to 2 million to the dollar. So the currency is largely worthless. Now, the real question militarily is they still have ballistic missiles, long range and short range. They still have cruise missiles. They still have drones. What percent of that inventory is still operating? That, I think, is the key question. My own sense is that they still have probably a few thousand missiles and drones. So that means they still have options, even if we've been able to intercept about 90% of what they launch. So 10% gets through. If you're talking about hitting desalination plants or sensitive, high-value oil facilities that have specialized equipment, that if you take that out, you can take them out for a few months, they still have the ability to threaten that. If we were in a position where you could take out 90% of their missiles, cruise missiles, and drones, they would be in a position where they would need to find a way to end this much more quickly because, A, they would realize their ability to threaten goes way down, but B, their neighbors would be far less fearful of their ability to threaten these high-value targets.
Okay. Very interesting. Really insightful, Ambassador. Thank you for your company tonight. Nice to talk to you. Ambassador Denis Ross, who is a former US Middle East peace envoy under Bush and Clinton's administrations,